Hi everyone. This is Dr. Victoria Nalule. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Nalule Energy and Mining Consultancy, an international consulting firm focused on oil, gas, energy mining, climate change, and energy transitions. So, in this series of webinars, the target is to reach 200 videos before the end of 2022. Very ambitious. But here with me is Dr. Eddy Wifa from the University of Aberdeen. He's a renowned lawyer and expert in energy law, but I don't want to give you more information about him. I would like him to introduce himself, sell himself, tell you about all his expertise, the different initiatives he has done, and then there afterwards we're going to talk about the topic of natural gas and third party access, and also the increasing role of natural gas in transition to a low carbon economy, but also in tackling the global energy crisis. But first, I'll ask Dr. Eddy to briefly introduce himself.
All right. Again, thank you so much for the invite, Dr. Victoria Nalule, again, and thanks for all the excellent work you guys are doing at NEM. I think, just adding that extra voice and that extra push to the conversations on energy-related issues, particularly in Africa and globally, is indeed fundamental. My name is Dr. Eddy Wifa, and I am an oil and gas lawyer and academic, but I also specialize in renewable energy with specific focus on offshore wind risk governance. And I've worked on a number of projects and consulted for a number of jurisdictions on offshore wind related issues, from planning to energy justice to health safety, as well as ecological risks. At the center here, I work at the Aberdeen University Center for Energy Law. I also work under the Center for Energy Transition, but I also direct the Nigerian Energy Research Group, as well as I'm also founder and director of the African Natural Resources and Energy Law Network. I have done a number of projects as well. Recently just completed one on offshore wind lighting and safety. I've consulted for the Norwegian government on offshore wind as well, and been part of projects in Norway, in Australia, in US as well, and also Scotland and the UK at large. So I teach on a number of subjects here as well, in those areas, and really looking forward to sharing some thoughts today on natural gas and third-party access.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. When you are speaking, I'm like, oh, he's been involved in so many projects. I need some money from him, with all those big countries you're consulting with and the work you're doing. I should just send in my bill for Christmas. But
I'm
anyway,
sure we can work on that.
and our viewers, as you can see, we have an expert in the area. So today, although you have expertise in different areas in the energy sector, today we want to focus on the role of natural gas and third-party access. So in your view, where do you see natural gas with respect to tackling the global energy crisis? And also recently, it has been referred as a transition energy. So what is the role of natural gas in our economies?
Again, really, really fantastic topic for a number of reasons. I mean, we've seen the variety of issues that have been caused by global incidents, some we don't have any control over. And that's to demonstrate in a number of ways the sensitivity and volatility of the energy space. And I think having this sort of conversations and exploring the roles of different energy sources to mitigate these crises and these issues is indeed fundamental. I consider natural gas to play a really vital role, but one that we must treat very cautiously for a number of reasons. It is without doubt that natural gas is a lot cleaner than fossil fuel, and a number of emerging energy jurisdictions are really considering natural gas as that transition fuel. They do that in a number of ways, but I also think there's a lot of research that should also explore the the level of emissions over the entire value chain, not just with natural gas, with all energy sources that we intend to use, including wind energy, solar, and all of that. There's a lot of engagement that is required to understand how these sources play from a more technical angle. But in terms of the pragmatic approach of natural gas, one of the issues that we have seen that has caused increasing number of concerns for governments, regulators, and even stakeholders and companies is how we can guarantee some level of third-party access. And in this sense, what we really refer to is to what extent can smaller, or emerging oil fields tie in or connect to existing larger infrastructures, and that is important for a number of reasons. And in UK in particular, you begin to understand that following the history of oil and gas development in North Sea. And if you look at the history of the North Sea by Professor Alex Kemp, a lot of detail is put into this. UK found oil and gas at a really, significant point in its history where it was particular about maximizing those resources, and in such paid less attention to other issues around regulations, infrastructure, and all of that. In fact, that was some of the reasons that led to the sale of the British National Oil Company. And to this day, there are some concerns and regrets. And if you've listened to Labour Party speak, you would hear that the Labour Party is keen to bring back a sort of national carrier, national owned energy company. Of course, in this sense, it's referring to renewables or green energy, but the idea, it's largely the same. But at the time, UK Fan Oil was really keen on this drive, and that led to that theory of the political economy of speed, where there was a lot of enthusiasm to maximize the resources at the expense of everything else. Now, fast forward back to today, there's a growing realization that it operated a licensing approach which sort of put everything to a very large extent in the hands of private companies. Some of them have done fantastically well, but others in a number of ways are now in large control of the infrastructure in the area, in the region, and in particular in the North Sea. And so that has led people to ask, what happens where there is some requirement to take some control of these infrastructure in some ways? It means the government doesn't have a direct connection or a direct link to this infrastructure because it doesn't have, say, for example, a national oil company, and it doesn't have that sort of operational regime that allows it to control the private sector in that as much as it would want. So that has then led to a number of questions in the role of third-party access. And so the situation we found ourselves in is in a number of ways conflicted. Government appears to be conflicted because we have large, advanced and sophisticated energy companies or oil and gas companies that have built infrastructure. Now those infrastructure are now aging in a number of ways and maybe should be getting to the point of decommissioning. But because of the maximization of economic recovery initiative by the government to say, how can we make the most of the resources in the North Sea? There is this idea of how large infrastructure can be tied into smaller emerging fields. So look at it this way. Imagine that I am a very large oil company. I have, very big infrastructure, and you, Victoria, or two, three other people have three or four emerging oil infrastructure that cannot support an independent, infrastructure in terms of the installation and all of that. You might have been given a license, but the license may not be of commercial value to build your own independent infrastructure. And so in order to maximize those resources, you're hoping you can tie in to my own large infrastructure without having to build a brand new infrastructure yourself. Now, the law tells you under the Petroleum Act that you should negotiate with me as the big infrastructure owner. So if you find gas in any emerging, it might be 20 fields, 50 fields, any as much as you find, and you cannot build those infrastructure yourself, negotiate with me and I should grant you third party access. It means if you tie to me from your own infrastructure, I will then carry your own gas or carry your own oil, whatever it is, onshore, and you pay me whatever is required for using my infrastructure. Now, that would have been ideal, and that would have been the perfect love story. But for a number of reasons, the big guy who owns the big infrastructure is not particularly keen to give the smaller guy access, because for competition reasons, two, for conflict reasons, because that guy may be a competitor, not necessarily maybe within the North Sea in UK, but he may be a competitor in Africa. He may be a competitor in the Middle East. So why should I grant him that sort of favor? And then he becomes my competitor somewhere else, giving him a bit of leverage. So the big guy says, sorry, I am not interested. On the other hand, the law allows the small guy, the small infrastructure company, to report to the regulator to say, look at the big guy isn't giving me access, but we need to maximize the recovery from these initiatives. You've given us the license, you've given us the opportunity to make this money, but we cannot make as much as we want because this big guy doesn't give us the infrastructure. Also, we don't have enough commercial value to build our own infrastructure. So what does the government do? Ideally, under Section 17F of the Petroleum Act, the government is meant to authorize the big company to give him notice. Now, taking into account a number of conditions, including technical visibility, including past relationships, including transparency, and all of those things. But the government is also reluctant to force the big company to grant the small company access. So you see how conflicted the system is. The government doesn't want to compel the big company to grant access to those natural resources or to the natural gas because it might have had, it doesn't want to upset the very big company that has been paying taxes and giving it all the big money for the past maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and may as well be the owner of a lot of other large infrastructure in the North Sea. So the government is caught in between, one hand trying to encourage a smaller company to maximize those economic recovery, of course, in the interest of the government as well, but also in its own interest. But it also doesn't want to do that by upsetting the big company. So it is a conflicted situation that the UK has found itself in terms of third-party access. Now, they've done the research and they found out that in most cases, the government has been reluctant. There are one or two cases where the government has stepped in as a mediator and that has worked out well. But in majority of the cases, it has been stalemate. The government has been reluctant. And so you have a lot of fallow areas. You have a lot of fields that are unexplored because of this third-party access. And if we want to mitigate the impact of the energy crisis and maximize these resources as much as we want, then we need to find a way to arrange for the government to step in or for these parties to independently negotiate of themselves. And so by some change to the regulation, the Energy Act 2008 and now 2016, there has been inserted something called the automatic referral notice, which is basically that automatically at the point of negotiation, if nothing is achieved, right, the government can automatically, without being called on, can automatically within 6 months step in. All right. But even the automatic referral notice has not also worked as well as the one, because 6 months is a short time for companies to negotiate. The smaller companies doesn't want to make, is embarrassed thinking, okay, it's running to a big company, running to the government to step in on its behalf. There's a bit of conflict between all of the parties. So even the automatic referral notice has been seen not to work as effective as it should. Now, this is a very important issue because it brings out a lot of questions for emerging oil and gas jurisdictions that have not paid attention into the regulation of third-party access. The UK is dealing with it now because it's a mature province. And so it might have started building on without thinking of what will happen 50 years down the line. But for emerging oil and gas industries or countries like Namibia and Mozambique or Tanzania, and all of these countries, they need to proactively design a third-party access regime as soon as possible and anticipate what would likely occur in 50 years' time when they are trying to maximize smaller fields that cannot, sustain itself or build its own infrastructure. So it's a really, really important topic, not only in the context of the energy crisis or the energy transition, but also in the context of the global energy dynamics. Now, if you look at that, if we just to touch on, a comparative element of the conversation slightly, Norway has also, has dealt with that problem in a number of ways, but that is because Norway has Equinor, which is largely a government-owned enterprise. Of course, there's some private ownership, but because it has Equinor, formerly Start Oil, it has a number of infrastructure of its own. All right. So it means that if there is need for that tie-in and connect, Equinor on the part of government can take those decisions in that regard and resolve some of those tensions. So it then makes the UK ask itself, is it too late for it to have a national carrier? Is it too late to have a national oil company? And what are the emerging issues that may come as a result of that? But again, like I said, it is a very complex dynamic situation in the UK that remains not resolved as much as we want, and where things are moving a lot slowly, but it draws the attention of emerging energy jurisdictions to say, deal with third-party access issues as soon as you can, as early as possible, and don't be caught up 50 years down the line trying to mediate over a dispute or an issue that is, quite frankly, difficult, particularly difficult to navigate. So those are some initial thoughts, but hopefully we can have a more technical discussion on third-party access. And I'm currently working on a paper on that, and hopefully I could share that with the rest of you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Eddie. When you were talking, I couldn't even interrupt you because I was also learning a lot about third-party access and how it's important not
Mhm,
only for the UK but also for the emerging countries, African
mhm,
countries, and other Asian countries.
mhm,
So I think this is a great topic, and it has given us a good ground to
mhm,
have more technical conversations
mhm,
on how we can deal with third-party access. So this
mhm.
being a short video, this will be the end of the video, but our viewers just take note of everything he has said, and we shall have a more technical discussion about the issue of third-party access next year, hopefully. All right, thanks a lot, Eddie. Let me just stop
Thank you.
recording. All right.
Thank you so much, Victoria.